The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the weathered saloon, and Penelope Winters knew she had exactly 3 minutes before her father discovered she had stolen his signet ring to pay for passage out of Santa Fe. It was June of 1878, and the New Mexico Territory sun beat down on Placitas with the kind of heat that made everything shimmer like a mirage. Penelope stepped down from the coach, her traveling dress already clinging to her back with perspiration, and surveyed the small settlement with a mixture of hope and desperation. Behind her lay a future she refused to accept, an arranged marriage to a 50-year-old banker who smelled of tobacco and spoke to her like she was a child. She was 22 years old, and she would rather die in this dusty nowhere town than spend her life as Clayton Merrick's ornamental wife. The problem was that Placitas looked exactly like what it was, a way station between somewhere and nowhere, with perhaps 24 buildings scattered along a single main road. There was the saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, a small church, and several houses that had seen better days. In the distance, she could see a ranch sprawling across the valley, cattle dotting the landscape like dark seeds scattered across golden grass. Penelope had $17 left after paying for the coach, and she needed a plan. Her father would send men looking for her within days, maybe hours if he discovered the theft quickly enough. She needed somewhere to stay, somewhere to disappear, at least long enough to figure out her next move. That was when she saw him. He was leaning against the hitching post outside the general store, tall and lean with the kind of casual confidence that came from knowing exactly who you were. His hat was pulled low, casting shadows across a face that was all angles and sun-weathered skin. He wore dusty work clothes, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, and leather chaps that had seen years of hard use. There was a pistol at his hip, worn with the ease of someone who knew how to use it but did not need to prove it. He was watching her. Not in the leering way some men did, but with a kind of curious assessment, like he was trying to figure out what a woman in a fine traveling dress was doing stepping off a coach in Placitas with no luggage and fear in her eyes. Penelope made a decision in that moment, born of desperation, and the kind of recklessness that only comes from having nothing left to lose. She took 3 steps away from the coach, made sure he was still watching, and then deliberately caught her heel on the edge of the wooden walkway. She went down hard, crying out as she twisted to protect her fall, landing in an undignified heap in the dust. The pain in her palms where they scraped against the ground was real enough. The gasp that escaped her lips was genuine. But when she grabbed her ankle and let out a moan of distress, that was pure theater. She heard boots hitting the ground, the quick stride of someone moving with purpose. Then he was there, kneeling beside her, and Penelope found herself looking up into eyes the color of whiskey held up to lamplight, amber and warm and far too perceptive. "Easy now," he said, and his voice was low and rough like stones tumbling in a creek. "Let me see." His hands were careful as they moved to her ankle, surprisingly gentle for their size. Penelope forced herself to wince, to pull back as if the touch hurt. "I think it might be broken," she said, and she was rather proud of how her voice trembled. "I cannot put any weight on it at all." Those amber eyes flicked up to meet hers, and for just a moment Penelope saw something there that made her breath catch. Knowledge. Understanding. He knew. Somehow he knew she was lying, but all he said was, "We should get you somewhere you can rest. Doc Parker is 2 towns over, will not be through until Thursday. That is 3 days from now." He stood, then bent to scoop her up into his arms before she could protest. "I am Yates Ingram. I run the ranch outside town. You have a name, miss." "Penelope Winters," she said automatically, then cursed herself for using her real name. But it was too late now, and she was too distracted by the solid warmth of his chest against her side, the easy strength with which he carried her like she weighed nothing at all. "Well, Miss Winters, looks like you will be staying in Placitas for a few days at least." There was something in his tone, a hint of amusement that made her certain he saw right through her ruse. "We have got a boarding house of sorts. Mrs. Chen runs it above the general store. She will have a room for you." "I do not have much money," Penelope admitted, because that at least was true. "We will figure something out," Yates said, and started walking. People were staring now, emerging from doorways to see what the commotion was about. Penelope saw a Chinese woman step out onto the balcony above the general store, her face creased with concern. An older man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest watched from the saloon steps. A group of ranch hands paused their conversation to stare. "Found ourselves a injured traveler," Yates called up to the woman on the balcony. "She's going to need a room for a few days, Mrs. Chen. Ankle is in bad shape." Mrs. Chen disappeared back inside, and moments later Penelope heard footsteps on the stairs. The woman reappeared at the side door, gesturing them inside. Bring her up, poor thing." "What happened?" "Twisted it coming off the coach," Yates explained, carrying Penelope up the narrow staircase with an ease that spoke of hard physical labor performed daily. "Doc will not be through until Thursday." 3 days with a broken ankle. "Oh no, this is not good," Mrs. Chen fretted, leading them down a hallway to a small but clean room. The furniture was simple, a bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand, a chair by the window. Yates set Penelope down on the bed with surprising care. "Thank you," Penelope said softly, and found she meant it. "You are very kind." "We take care of folks in trouble out here," Yates said. "It is what we do." He tipped his hat. "I will check on you tomorrow, Miss Winters. See how you are doing." After he left, Mrs. Chen helped Penelope remove her boots, tutting over the ankle that showed no signs of swelling or bruising. If the older woman noticed anything amiss, she was too polite to say so. She brought water and towels, promised to send up dinner later, and extracted a promise from Penelope to rest. Alone in the room, Penelope lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding. She had done it. She had bought herself time. 3 days until the doctor came, and if she was clever, she could stretch it longer. Claim the ankle was healing slowly, that she needed more time before she could travel. The image of Yates Ingram's knowing eyes rose in her mind, and she felt a flutter of something that might have been fear or might have been something else entirely. He knew she was lying, but he had helped her anyway. Why? Penelope fell asleep trying to puzzle it out, exhausted from travel and fear and the weight of the decision she had made. When she woke, the room was dim with evening light, and Mrs. Chen was setting a tray on the small table by the window. "You slept long time," the older woman said with approval. "This is good. Body needs rest to heal. I bring you stew and bread. You eat." The food was simple but delicious, rich beef stew with vegetables and thick slices of fresh bread. Penelope ate slowly, savoring each bite and trying to plan her next move. She had no idea how much Mrs. Chen charged for the room. If it was more than $1 a night, her money would not last the week. As if reading her thoughts, Mrs. Chen said, "You do not worry about payment right now. Yates, he say he will cover your room until you can travel. He is good man, that one. Best rancher in the territory, and he take care of people." Penelope felt her cheeks flush with shame. Yates was paying for her room, paying to support her deception. "I cannot accept his charity. That would not be proper." "You are hurt," Mrs. Chen said simply. "What else you going to do? Sleep in the street?" No, you rest, you heal, then you figure out what is next." She collected the empty dishes. I bring breakfast in the morning. You need anything in the night, you call out. I am right down the hall. After the woman left, Penelope limped to the window, barely remembering to favor her supposedly injured ankle. The town was quiet below, just a few people moving along the street in the gathering dusk. She could see lights glowing in windows, hear the distant sound of a piano from the saloon. And there, riding down the main street on a big buckskin horse, was Yates Ingram, heading back toward his ranch. Penelope watched until he disappeared into the twilight, and wondered what kind of man helped a woman he knew was lying to him. The next morning, she woke to find Mrs. Chen had left a basin of cool water, fresh towels, and a simple dress that looked like it would fit. There was a note in careful handwriting. Traveling clothes too hot for summer. You borrow this. The dress was pale yellow cotton, worn but clean, and it fit reasonably well even if it was a bit loose in the bodice. Penelope washed and changed, braided her dark hair, and was just finishing when she heard boots on the stairs. A knock came at the door. Miss Winters, it is Yates Ingram. I came to check on your ankle. Penelope grabbed the bedpost and carefully lowered herself to sit on the edge of the mattress, arranging her skirts to hide her supposedly injured ankle. Come in. He entered, hat in hand, and seemed to fill the small room with his presence. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 20s, with dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. There was a scar above his left eyebrow, a thin white line that gave him a slightly roguish look. How are you feeling? He asked, setting his hat on the chair. It hurts quite a lot, Penelope said, which was not entirely a lie. Her palm still stung from where she had caught herself, and she had developed a genuine bruise on her hip from the fall. I am so sorry to be a burden. Mrs. Chen said you are paying for the room. I will pay you back as soon as I am able, I promise. No rush, Yates said easily. He pulled the chair closer and sat, his long legs stretched out in front of him. Mind if I take a look at it? I have set my share of broken bones over the years. Comes with running a ranch. Penelope's heart began to race. If he examined it closely, he would know for certain that there was nothing wrong. But refusing would be suspicious. She had no choice but to extend her legs slightly, her bare foot pale against the dark floorboards. Yates's hands were gentle as they circled her ankle, his fingers probing carefully. His touch sent an unexpected shock of warmth through her, and Penelope had to remind herself to wince, to act as if it hurt. He said thoughtfully, those amber eyes fixed on her face rather than her ankle. Might not be broken after all, could just be a bad sprain. That is good news. You might be able to put weight on it sooner than Thursday. Perhaps, Penelope said carefully, but it still hurts terribly. I bet it does, Yates said, and there was definitely amusement in his voice now. He released her ankle and sat back. Well, you rest up. No point in rushing things and making it worse. He paused. What brings you to Placitas, Miss Winters? This is not exactly a destination people travel to on purpose. Penelope had prepared for this question. I was on my way to California. To meet my aunt. She runs a dress shop in Sacramento. Long journey for a woman alone, Yates observed. Your family did not object. My father passed away 6 months ago, Penelope said, which was a lie. I have no other family except my aunt. I sold our house in Santa Fe to finance the trip. She watched his face for signs that he recognized the name Santa Fe, that he might make connections that would put her in danger. But he just nodded sympathetically. I am sorry for your loss, he said. It takes courage to start over somewhere new. He stood, collecting his hat. Mrs. Chen will take good care of you. If you need anything at all, you just let her know and she will get word to me. Why are you being so kind to me? Penelope blurted out before she could stop herself. You do not know me at all. Yates paused at the door, his hand on the frame. For a moment, he did not answer, and Penelope thought he might ignore the question entirely. Then he turned back, and his expression was serious. 5 years ago, I was trying to drive cattle through a pass in Colorado in late autumn. Got caught in an early blizzard. Lost my way, thought I was going to freeze to death. Stumbled into a Ute camp half dead. They had no reason to help me. White ranchers had been pushing them off their land, killing their game, but they took me in anyway. Fed me, warmed me, sent me on my way with supplies. The chief said something I never forgot. He said that out here, in country that can kill you just for being careless, we only survive by taking care of each other. Does not matter if you are a stranger. Does not matter if you have nothing to give in return. We are all just trying to make it through. He settled his hat back on his head. So when I see someone who needs help, I help. Simple as that. He left before Penelope could respond, his boots heavy on the stairs, and she sat staring at the door long after he was gone. She had expected him to expose her, to confront her about the lie. Instead, he was protecting her, giving her space to do whatever it was she needed to do. The knowledge sat heavy and strange in her chest. Penelope spent the day in her room, reading a battered copy of a dime novel Mrs. Chen had lent her and watching the town from her window. She saw Yates ride back through late in the afternoon, stopping at the general store before heading up to check on her again. This time, he brought supplies. Bandages, liniment, a pair of crutches. Thought these might help, he said, leaning the crutches against the wall. Belonged to one of my ranch hands who broke his leg last year. He does not need them anymore. You are too generous, Penelope protested weakly. Just practical, Yates countered. Can hardly stay in bed for days on end. You will want to move around some, keep the ankle from getting stiff. He showed her how to use the crutches, standing close enough that she could smell leather and sage and something else, something that was just him. Penelope tried to focus on the mechanics of the crutches rather than the way her pulse jumped when his hand steadied her elbow. There you go, he said when she managed a few halting steps. You will get the hang of it quick enough. Thank you, Penelope said, and then, because she could not help herself, you know I am lying, do you not? The words hung in the air between them. Yates looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. I know you are running from something, he said finally, and I know you are scared. The rest of it, well, that is your business. He moved toward the door, then paused. But Miss Winters, when you are ready to tell me the truth, I will listen. No judgment, no conditions, just listening. Then he was gone again, and Penelope sank down onto the bed, her hands shaking. She had been caught out in her deception, but somehow it did not feel like losing. It felt like being seen, really seen, for the first time in her life. The next 2 days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Penelope practiced with the crutches until she could move around her room with relative ease. Mrs. Chen brought her meals and pleasant conversation, telling her stories about the town and its inhabitants. Penelope learned that Placitas had been established 15 years ago as a trading post, that it survived mostly on the cattle ranches that dotted the surrounding valley, that Yates Ingram had bought his ranch 5 years ago with money saved from years of trail driving, and had built it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. He is good man, Mrs. Chen said again, and Penelope was beginning to understand that this was not just polite platitude but genuine respect. Everyone here, we all owe him something. He give jobs when people need work. He lend money when times are hard. Last winter, when the snow was so bad, he bring food to all the families in town, make sure no one go hungry, and he never ask for anything back. Why has he not married? Penelope asked, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Chen shrugged. He was engaged once, long time ago, girl from Denver. She come out to see the ranch, Take one look at this place and get back on the coach the same day. Say she not going to live in the middle of nowhere with dirt and cows. Break his heart, I think. After that, he just focus on the ranch. Say he not going to ask any woman to give up civilization for this life. Penelope thought about that conversation often over the next 2 days. She thought about it when Yates came by each evening to check on her, bringing small gifts. A book of poetry that he said had been his mother's. A bag of peppermint candies from the general store. A carved wooden bird that one of his ranch hands had made. "You do not have to keep bringing me things," she said on the second evening, turning the little bird over in her hands. It was a hawk captured mid-flight, wings spread wide. "I know," Yates said. He was sitting in the chair by the window, his hat on his knee, watching her with that steady gaze that made her feel like he could see right through to her bones. "I want to." "Why?" Penelope asked. It seemed to be the question she kept asking him. "Because you look like you have not had anyone be kind to you in a while," Yates said simply. "And everyone deserves kindness." Penelope felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She blinked hard, turning her face away so he would not see the tears that threatened. "You do not know anything about me." "Then tell me," Yates said. "Tell me something true." So she did. Not the whole truth, not yet, but pieces of it. She told him about growing up in Santa Fe, about her mother who had died when she was 12, about feeling like she was drowning in expectations and propriety, and the endless, suffocating sameness of each day. She told him about wanting something more, something bigger, something real. She did not tell him about her father, still very much alive and probably furious. She did not tell him about Clayton Merrick or the arranged marriage or the stolen ring. But she told him enough that he would understand why she had lied, why she needed to disappear. Yates listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I came out here for the same reasons," he said finally. "I grew up in St. Louis. My father wanted me to work in his bank, wear a suit every day, count money and approve loans and live in a nice house on a nice street with nice neighbors. It was a good life, a comfortable life, and I hated every second of it." He smiled, a little rueful. "I left the day I turned 18. Spent 5 years working cattle drives, learning the land, saving every penny. When I had enough, I bought this ranch and never looked back." "Do you regret it?" Penelope asked. "Not for a single moment," Yates said. "Out here, you are what you make of yourself. Does not matter who your father was or how much money you have. What matters is if you can work hard, if you can be trusted, if you will stand by your people when things get tough." He met her eyes. "Out here, you can be whoever you want to be." The words settled into Penelope's chest like a promise. On Thursday, Doc Parker arrived on schedule, riding into town on a spotted mare with saddlebags full of medical supplies. Penelope heard about it from Mrs. Chen and felt her stomach drop. She would have to let him examine her ankle, and he would know immediately that there was nothing wrong with it. But when she heard boots on the stairs, it was Yates who appeared at her door, not the doctor. "Doc Parker is here," he said without preamble. "He's going to want to examine your ankle." "I know," Penelope said miserably. Yates stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "So we have got 2 choices. We can tell him the truth and you can explain why you lied, or—" He paused. "Or we can tell him you have been doing so well with treatment that he does not need to examine you, that the swelling has gone down and you are getting movement back, that you will just need another week or so of taking it easy before you can travel." Penelope stared at him. "You would lie for me." "To the doctor, I would bend the truth a little to protect someone who needs protecting," Yates corrected. "There is a difference." "Why?" It was becoming her constant refrain, this question. Why would he do this for her? Yates crossed the room to stand in front of her. He was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes. Because in the 3 days I have known you, Penelope Winters, you have made me laugh more than I have in the past year, he said quietly. Because you are brave and clever and you are fighting for something, even if you will not tell me what it is yet. Because when you talk about wanting something real, something bigger, I see myself 5 years ago, and because. He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. Because I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the moment you stepped off that coach. Penelope could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything but stare at him as her heart hammered against her ribs. I do not expect anything from you, Yates continued. I am not asking for anything. But if you need more time, if you need a place to figure things out, then I will make sure you have that. However long you need. Yates, she whispered, and it was the first time she had used his given name. It felt intimate, dangerous, like stepping off a cliff with no idea how far the fall might be. A knock at the door made them both jump. Miss Winters, came Mrs. Chen's voice. The doctor is here to see you. Yates stepped back, putting proper distance between them. What do you want to do? Penelope made her decision. Tell him I have been responding well to treatment. Yates nodded and went to open the door. Doc Parker was a thin, energetic man in his 50s with wire-rimmed spectacles and an air of perpetual motion. He bustled into the room, already talking. Heard you took a nasty fall, young lady. Let me have a look at that ankle. Actually, Doc, Yates interjected smoothly, she has been doing much better. The swelling has gone down significantly. She has been using crutches and getting movement back. We were not sure if you needed to examine it at all. Doc Parker frowned. Well, if it was broken, it would still need to be set properly. Let me just take a quick look. There was no way around it. Penelope extended her ankle, trying to keep her expression neutral. The doctor's hands were quick and professional, probing and flexing. He said after a moment. You are right, Yates. This looks like it is healing nicely. Must have been a sprain rather than a break. Nasty one though, I can tell, still some tenderness here. He pressed gently on a spot that happened to be where Penelope had bruised her ankle when she fell, and her wince of pain was completely genuine. See, still healing. You did right to stay off it. I would give it another week before you try to travel, young lady, maybe 2 to be safe. After the doctor left, Penelope and Yates looked at each other. That bruise saved me, Penelope said, and then, inexplicably, she started to laugh. It bubbled up out of her, part relief and part hysteria, and once she started, she could not stop. Yates was grinning, and then he was laughing too, and they stood there in her little rented room laughing like fools while Mrs. Chen's footsteps faded down the hall. When the laughter finally subsided, Yates said, So, 2 more weeks. What are you going to do with them? I have no idea, Penelope admitted. I have not thought that far ahead. Well, Yates said, if you are going to be stuck in Placitas for 2 weeks, you might as well see something besides this room. Once you are a bit steadier on those crutches, maybe you would like to come out to the ranch. See what it is I actually do all day. I would like that, Penelope said softly. I would like that very much. 3 days later, Yates arrived with a buckboard wagon instead of his horse. Figured this would be easier than trying to get you up on a saddle, he explained as he helped her down the stairs. Mrs. Chen fussed over her, making sure she had a hat to keep off the sun and a shawl in case the evening turned cool. The ride out to the ranch took about 30 minutes, following a well-worn track that wound through golden grassland dotted with cattle. Mountains rose in the distance, purple-blue against the endless sky. The air smelled of sage and dust and wildflowers. It is beautiful, Penelope breathed and meant it. She had never seen so much open space, so much sky. It made her feel simultaneously insignificant and infinite, like she could dissolve into all that blue and gold and never be found. "It is," Yates agreed. "Never gets old, no matter how many times I see it." The ranch house was a long, low building made of adobe and wood, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. There were corrals and barns and several smaller buildings scattered nearby. As they approached, a half-dozen men emerged from various structures, all of them stopping to stare at the woman in the wagon. "Boys," Yates called out, "this is Miss Penelope Winters. She is recovering from an injury and will be visiting for the day. I expect you all to be on your best behavior." The men touched their hats respectfully, murmuring greetings. They were a mixed group, ranging in age from a boy who could not have been more than 16 to a grizzled man with white hair and a limp. One of them was Mexican, another had the weathered look of someone who had spent years in the sun, and a third had a long scar down his face that spoke of violence survived. Yates helped Penelope down from the wagon with careful hands, making sure she had her crutches before releasing her. "Come on, I will show you around." The ranch was a revelation. Yates walked her through the operation, explaining how they managed the herd, how they dealt with disease and predators, and the endless challenges of trying to keep cattle alive in harsh territory. He introduced her to his foreman, a quiet man named Tom who had worked ranches all his life, and to the young Mexican cowboy called Diego who was training horses in one of the corrals. "You really built all this yourself?" Penelope asked, watching Diego work a spirited bay mare on a long lead. "With a lot of help," Yates said. "But yeah, mostly. When I bought this land, there was nothing here but grass and hope. Took 3 years to build it up to where we could turn a profit. Now we run about 500 head of cattle, supply beef to forts and towns all across the territory." "It is a good life. It suits you," Penelope said. And it did. Out here, with his ranch spread around him and the sun beating down, Yates looked completely at peace in a way she envied desperately. They ate lunch on the porch, simple fare of bread and cheese and cold chicken that Yates's cook had prepared. The cook turned out to be a surprise, a Chinese man named Lin who was Mrs. Chen's husband. He spoke little English, but his food was excellent, and he watched Penelope with the same knowing eyes his wife had. After lunch, Yates took her to see the horses. They were beautiful animals, well cared for and healthy. Penelope had learned to ride as a child before her mother died, but it had been years since she had been on a horse. "This is Daisy," Yates said, stopping in front of a stall that held a pretty chestnut mare with a white blaze. "Gentlest horse I have got. When your ankle is better, maybe I could teach you to ride again." "I would like that," Penelope said. She reached out to stroke the mare's soft nose, and Daisy wafted into her palm, warm breath and velvet skin. They spent the afternoon just talking, sitting on the porch while Yates whittled a piece of wood and Penelope watched the ranch hands go about their work. She told him more about her life in Santa Fe, carefully editing out the parts that would reveal too much. He told her about the challenges of running a ranch, about droughts and blizzards and cattle rustlers, about the satisfaction of building something with your own hands. "I have never met anyone like you," Penelope said as the sun began to sink toward the mountains. "You are not like the men I knew in Santa Fe." "Is that a good thing?" Yates asked, glancing up from his whittling. "It is a very good thing," Penelope said firmly. "The men I knew were all worried about appearances, about saying the right things and wearing the right clothes and maintaining their positions in society. You just are who you are, no pretense, no games." "Life is too short for pretense," Yates said. "And out here, games will get you killed. You have to be honest about who you are and what you can do. Your life might depend on it someday." As he drove her back to town in the gathering dusk, Penelope found herself wishing the day did not have to end. She had never felt so comfortable with anyone, so able to just be herself without constantly editing her words and actions. When they reached the boarding house, Yates helped her down from the wagon and walked her to the door. They stood in the evening shadows, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "Thank you for today," Penelope said. "It was wonderful. We will do it again," Yates promised. "Whenever you want." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so gentle and intimate that Penelope felt her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he smiled, tipped his hat and walked back to the wagon. Penelope stood in the doorway and watched him drive away, her heart doing strange things in her chest. Over the next week, visiting the ranch became a regular occurrence. Yates would arrive every few days with the wagon, and they would spend hours together. He taught her about the land, about reading the weather and finding water and identifying the plants that could heal or harm. She learned the names of all his ranch hands, learned their stories. Tom the foreman had been a Union soldier during the war, had come west to escape the memories. Diego was saving money to buy land of his own someday, to build a horse ranch. The scarred man was called Pete, and he had been a bare-knuckle fighter in San Francisco before a bout gone wrong left him with permanent damage to his eye. The youngest hand, whose name was Jimmy, was an orphan Yates had found half-starved in Albuquerque 2 years ago. "You collect strays," Penelope observed one afternoon. They were sitting by the creek that ran through Yates's property, watching the water slide over smooth stones. "I hire good workers," Yates corrected, but he was smiling. "Maybe I've got a soft spot for people who need a second chance." "Sue me." "I think it is admirable," Penelope said. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "You gave me a second chance too, even though you knew I was lying." "You want to tell me the real story yet?" Yates asked. There was no pressure in the question, just gentle inquiry, so Penelope told him. All of it. About her father, very much alive and very much a tyrant. About Clayton Merrick and the arranged marriage. About stealing the ring and running. About knowing that her father would be looking for her, that he would not give up, that eventually she would have to run again or face being dragged back to Santa Fe to fulfill the arrangement. Yates listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "This Clayton Merrick," he said finally. "Your father, he already took payment for the marriage." "Not payment exactly," Penelope said. "But Mr. Merrick agreed to invest heavily in my father's business. They shook hands on it. In my father's world, that is as binding as any contract." "But you never agreed," Yates said. "You never said you would marry this man." "My agreement was not required," Penelope said bitterly. "I am just a commodity to be traded, a way to secure a business deal." Yates stood abruptly, pacing along the creek bank. "That is not right. That is not how it should be." "But it is how it is," Penelope said. "At least in my world, or the world I came from." Yates turned to look at her, his amber eyes intense. "What if you did not go back? What if you stayed here?" Penelope's heart leaped, then plummeted. "My father would find me eventually, and when he did, he would force me to return. I am his property legally. Until I marry, he has complete control over my life." "Not out here, he does not," Yates said. "The law in the territories, it is different. Looser. A woman has more rights here than back east. If you married someone else, your father would have no claim on you at all." The words hung in the air between them. Penelope stared at him, her mouth dry. "Yates," she said carefully, "what are you suggesting?" He came back to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I am suggesting that if you wanted to stay, really stay, there is a way to make it legal, to make it so your father could not touch you." "You are talking about a marriage of convenience," Penelope said slowly. A practical arrangement. I am talking about marriage, yeah, Yates said. He turned to face her fully. But I would not call it a convenience, Penelope. I would not call anything about you convenient, her breath caught. What would you call it then? A chance, he said. For both of us. You get protection from your father and freedom to live your own life. I get. He paused, seemed to struggle with the words. I get to wake up every morning knowing you are here. I get to see you smile. I get to hear you laugh. I get to come home to someone who understands why I do this, why this land matters so much. You barely know me, Penelope whispered. I know enough, Yates said. I know you are brave. I know you are kind. I know you are not afraid of hard work or hard truths. I know that when you look at this land, you see what I see, something worth fighting for, something worth building a life on. He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm around hers. And I know that I am falling in love with you, maybe already have fallen. So if you need a practical reason, I can give you one. But the real reason I am asking is because I cannot imagine letting you leave. Penelope felt tears slide down her cheeks. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her the way Yates was looking at her now, like she was precious and strong and necessary all at once. I am falling in love with you too, she said, the words breaking on a sob. But I do not want you to marry me just to save me. That is not fair to you. Who says you would not be saving me? Yates asked. I told you about my engagement, about how she left. I thought I would never find someone who could love this life, who could love this place the way I do. Then you stumbled off that coach with your twisted ankle and your terrible lies, and I thought, here she is. Here is someone brave enough to run toward an unknown future instead of accepting one that would kill her spirit. Here is someone who might understand. What if I am not who you think I am? Penelope asked, terrified and hopeful in equal measure. What if I disappoint you? Impossible, Yates said. He reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. Penelope Winters, will you marry me? Will you stay here and build this life with me? Will you take a chance on a cowboy who has loved you since the moment he realized your ankle was just fine? You knew from the beginning, Penelope asked, laughing through her tears. Honey, I have seen enough injuries to know what a broken or sprained ankle looks like, Yates said, grinning. You did not even have swelling, but you looked so desperate, so scared, and I figured you had your reasons. Figured I would just wait and see what those reasons were. You are ridiculous, Penelope said. Is that a yes? Yates asked. Yes, Penelope said. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I will stay. Yes to all of it. Yates kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Penelope felt something in her chest loosen and expand, like she had been holding her breath for years and could finally exhale. They were married 3 days later by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Placitas. It was a simple ceremony held in the small church, with Mrs. Chen and her husband as witnesses. Penelope wore a dress Mrs. Chen had helped her sew from blue cotton, and Yates wore his best shirt and a string tie. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her in front of God and the Chen family and Jimmy, the young ranch hand who had ridden into town to watch. And Penelope felt like she was finally home. They spent their wedding night at the ranch house, in Yates's bedroom that became their bedroom. He was gentle with her, patient, making sure she was comfortable and ready. It was nothing like what her married friends in Santa Fe had described in hushed, nervous whispers. There was no pain, no disappointment. Just Yates's hands on her skin, his mouth on hers, the slow build of pleasure that left her gasping his name into the darkness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the window open to let in the cool night air and the sound of crickets. I cannot believe this is real, Penelope whispered. I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find out it was all a dream. It is real, Yates promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You are my wife. This is your home. This is your life now." "My father will come looking for me," Penelope said. She had been trying not to think about it, but the worry gnawed at her. "When he does not find me in California, he will start retracing the coach route. Eventually, he will get to Placitas." "Let him come," Yates said. "You are married now. Legally, you belong to yourself." "Well, technically you belong to me, but that is just the law being stupid. Point is, he cannot force you to do anything, and if he tries, he will have to go through me and every ranch hand on this property. We protect our own." Penelope believed him. She had seen how fiercely loyal his men were, how they would follow him into hell if he asked. It was the kind of loyalty you could not buy, only earn, and Yates had earned it through years of treating them fairly and standing by them when times were hard. Still, she could not shake the feeling that her father would not give up so easily. Daniel Winters was not a man accustomed to being defied, especially not by his daughter. 3 weeks passed in a kind of golden haze. Penelope threw herself into learning everything she could about ranch life. She helped Lynn in the kitchen, learning to cook meals for a dozen hungry men. She learned to tend the garden, to preserve food, to do laundry in the big copper tubs. She went riding with Yates every evening, her skill gradually returning until she could keep pace with him across the open range. The ranch hands accepted her with surprising ease. Tom taught her to rope, patiently coaching her throws until she could actually catch a fence post. Diego let her help with the horses, showing her how to curry them and check their hooves for stones. Even Pete, gruff and scarred, softened around her, calling her Mrs. Ingram with something like pride in his voice. At night, she and Yates would sit on the porch and watch the stars come out, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd, maybe start breeding horses. She told him about wanting to learn to read the land the way he did, to understand the rhythms and patterns that govern this wild, beautiful place. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and what made the other gasp and shake. Penelope had never known intimacy could be like this, easy and playful and intense all at once. She loved the weight of Yates above her, the way his eyes went dark with want, the sounds he made when she touched him just right. She was happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way she had never been in her entire life. And then, on a hot afternoon in late July, her father arrived. Penelope was in the kitchen helping Lynn prepare dinner when she heard the sound of horses approaching. She glanced out the window and felt her blood turn to ice. There were 4 men, all of them dressed for travel, and leading them was her father. Daniel Winters looked exactly as she remembered, tall and imposing with iron-gray hair and cold eyes. Even from a distance, she could see the anger in the set of his shoulders. "Lynn," she said, her voice shaking, "could you please go get Yates, quickly?" The cook took one look at her face and disappeared out the back door without a word. Penelope forced herself to walk out onto the porch, to stand tall even though her knees were shaking. Her father dismounted and strode toward her, his face thunderous. "Penelope," he said, and his voice was like a whip crack. "Get your things. We are leaving. Now." "No," Penelope said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I am not going anywhere with you. You are my daughter," Daniel said. "You will do as I say." "I am not your daughter anymore," Penelope said. "I am Yates Ingram's wife. You have no legal claim on me." She watched her father's face turn purple with rage. "You did what? You married some cowboy, some nobody. I have already made arrangements for your marriage to Clayton Merrick. The contracts are signed." "I never signed anything," Penelope said. "And I never will. I am married, father. That is the end of it." "The hell it is," Daniel snarled. He started toward the porch, but before he could reach her, Yates appeared from the barn, moving fast. He put himself between Penelope and her father, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. "That is far enough," Yates said, his voice calm but hard as iron. "You are on my land, and that is my wife you are threatening. I suggest you state your business and then leave." "Your wife," Daniel sneered. "She is a child who does not know her own mind. This marriage is a farce." "This marriage is legal and binding," Yates said. "Performed by a licensed preacher with witnesses. Consummated and recorded with the territorial authorities. There is nothing fake about it." The ranch hands were emerging from various buildings now, drawn by the sound of raised voices. They formed a loose semicircle behind Yates, their faces hard. Tom had his rifle, not pointing it at anyone but definitely holding it ready. Daniel looked around, assessing the situation, and seemed to realize he was outnumbered. His face twisted with fury. "You think you have won, Penelope? You have destroyed our family's reputation. Clayton Merrick is demanding satisfaction. He wants his money back, and if he does not get it, my business is ruined. Your selfishness has destroyed everything I built." "No," Penelope said, and there was steel in her voice now. "Your greed destroyed it. You tried to sell me like a piece of property, and I refused. That is not my fault." "It is yours." "You ungrateful little—" Daniel started forward again, but this time Yates drew his pistol, not aiming it but making it very clear what would happen if Daniel took another step. "You need to leave," Yates said. "Now. And if you ever come back here, if you ever threaten my wife again, it will not end well for you. That is not a threat. It is a promise." For a long moment, Daniel just stared at them. Then he spat in the dirt, turned on his heel, and stalked back to his horse. "You are dead to me," he said to Penelope. "You and whatever children you whelp with this nobody. Do not ever think about coming home." "I am home," Penelope said. "Right here." She watched her father and his men ride away, and she felt nothing but relief. No guilt, no regret. Just the bone-deep certainty that she had made the right choice. When they were out of sight, Yates holstered his pistol and turned to her. "Are you all right?" Penelope launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and holding on tight. Yates caught her easily, his arms coming up to hold her close. "I am all right," she said into his shoulder. "I am better than all right. I am free." That night, after the ranch hands had been reassured and Lynn had fed everyone an enormous dinner to settle nerves, Penelope and Yates lay in bed and talked about what had happened. "He might try to make trouble," Yates said. "File some kind of legal challenge to the marriage." "Let him try," Penelope said. "We have witnesses, we have proof, and like you said, out here the law is different. I am your wife. That is all that matters." "Still," Yates said, "I want you to be careful for a while. Do not go anywhere alone. If you go into town, take Tom or Diego with you." "You think he would try to kidnap me?" Penelope asked, startled. "I think he is angry and humiliated," Yates said. "And angry, humiliated men do stupid things. I am not taking any chances with your safety." But the weeks passed and Daniel Winters did not return. Word filtered back through travelers that he had left the territory entirely, gone back to Santa Fe to deal with the mess of his broken business arrangement. Penelope gradually relaxed, stopped looking over her shoulder every time she heard horses approaching. Life settled into a rhythm. Summer faded into autumn, the heat giving way to cooler days and cold nights. The cottonwoods along the creek turned gold, and the ranch prepared for winter. They rounded up the cattle, moved them to lower pastures, stocked up on supplies for the long months ahead. Penelope discovered she had a talent for managing the ranch finances. She took over the books from Yates, who hated paperwork, and found ways to save money and increase efficiency. She started a lending library of sorts, bringing books from town for the ranch hands who wanted to learn to read better. She taught Jimmy his letters in the evenings and watched with pride as the boy slowly spelled out simple sentences. In late October, she realized her monthly bleeding had not come. She waited another week to be sure, then told Yates one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I think I am pregnant," she said, and watched his face light up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Really?" he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby, I think so," Penelope said. "I will know for certain in a few more weeks, but yes, I think we are going to be parents." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt his shoulders shake with silent tears. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I am going to be a father," he said, like he could not quite believe it. "You are going to be a wonderful father," Penelope said. "Look at how you are with Jimmy with all the hands. You take care of people. It is what you do." "I am going to take care of you," Yates promised. "You and this baby, I swear it." He kept his promise. As Penelope's belly grew through the winter months, Yates was constantly hovering, making sure she did not lift anything heavy or work too hard. The ranch hands were almost as bad, treating her like she was made of glass. Tom built her a special chair with cushions for her back. Diego carved a cradle from cedar wood, sanding it smooth as silk. Lynn made baby clothes from soft cotton, tiny garments that made Penelope's eyes sting every time she looked at them. In March, when the snow was melting and the first hints of spring appeared on the land, Penelope went into labor. It was long and hard and terrifying, but Mrs. Chen was there, having moved to the ranch 2 weeks before to wait for the baby's arrival. She guided Penelope through it with calm competence, and when the sun rose on a new day, Penelope held her son in her arms. He was tiny and red-faced and perfect, with a thatch of dark hair and eyes that would eventually turn the same amber as his father's. Yates cried when he held him for the first time, tears streaming down his face without shame. "He is beautiful," Yates said. "You are so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for this." They named him Jacob, after Yates's grandfather, and the entire ranch celebrated his arrival. The hands took turns carving toys for him, competing to make the best rattle or the most elaborate mobile. Lynn cooked a feast. Tom rode into town and came back drunk, claiming he was celebrating the arrival of the future boss. Penelope had never been so tired or so happy in her life. Motherhood was harder than she expected, the endless cycle of feeding and changing, and trying to soothe a crying infant. But every time she looked at Jacob, every time she saw Yates cradling their son against his chest and singing some old trail song in a soft, off-key voice, she felt her heart expand to the point of bursting. The seasons turned. Jacob grew from a tiny infant to a chubby baby who laughed at everything and grabbed at anything within reach. When he was 6 months old, Yates put him on a horse for the first time, holding him secure in the saddle, and Penelope's heart clenched at the image of her 2 favorite people silhouetted against the endless sky. She got pregnant again when Jacob was a year old, and their daughter was born in the winter of 1880, arriving during a snowstorm with characteristic drama. They named her Rose, and she had Penelope's dark hair and stubborn chin. She was fierce from the start, crying with impressive volume and refusing to sleep through the night until she was nearly 6 months old. "She is just like you," Yates said one exhausted morning after Rose had been up crying half the night. But he was smiling when he said it, and the way he looked at their daughter was pure adoration. Life was full and busy and occasionally overwhelming, but it was theirs. Penelope watched her children grow, watched the ranch prosper, watched Yates turn from a young man into someone more settled. the lines around his eyes deepening from years of squinting into the sun, but his smile coming easier and more often. When Jacob was 4 and Rose was 2, Penelope got pregnant again. This time she had twins, 2 boys they named Matthew and Mark. The ranch hands joked that Yates was trying to build his own workforce, and Yates laughed and said if that was his plan, he would need about 6 more. But 4 children turned out to be their final count. Penelope had her hands full managing the household and the books while Yates ran the ranch. The children grew up wild and free, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with chores as soon as they were old enough to hold a rope or carry a bucket. Jacob turned out to have his father's talent with cattle and his mother's head for business. He would sit with Penelope for hours, learning the accounts, asking smart questions about profit margins and supply chains. Rose was a natural horsewoman, fearless and skilled, spending every spare moment in the corrals with Diego. The twins were inseparable troublemakers, always finding new ways to cause chaos. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. They expanded the herd, bought more land, built a second bunkhouse to accommodate more hands. Placitas grew too, from a sleepyway station to a proper town with a school and a new church, and even a small hotel. The railroad came through in 1885, making it easier to ship cattle to market, and Yates's operation became one of the largest in the territory. Through it all, Penelope never regretted her decision to step off that coach and fake a twisted ankle. She would catch Yates watching her sometimes, when he thought she was not looking, and the expression on his face made her heart squeeze. Love, yes, but also gratitude, like he could not quite believe his luck. "What are you thinking?" she asked him one evening. They were sitting on the porch as they had so many thousands of times before, watching the sun set and the children play in the yard. Jacob was teaching the twins to rope, while Rose sat on the fence and offered mostly unhelpful commentary. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man alive," Yates said. "I am thinking that the best thing that ever happened to me was a woman lying about a broken ankle." "I was not very convincing, was I?" Penelope said, laughing. "Terrible," Yates agreed. "Worst fake injury I have ever seen. I saw right through it." "And you helped me anyway," Penelope said softly. "Best decision I ever made," Yates said. He reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. His hands were still calloused from years of hard work, still strong and capable. "You gave me everything, Penelope. A family, a reason to come home at night, someone to build all this for. You gave me freedom," Penelope said. "You gave me a choice when I thought I had none. You gave me a life I love instead of one I would have hated." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children and their land and the sky turning colors that had no names. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. A horse whinnied in the corral. The smell of Lynn's cooking drifted from the kitchen. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stepped off that coach?" Yates asked. "Never," Penelope said. "Because I did step off. I made my choice, and every single day since then has been a gift." As the years passed, Jacob grew into a young man who was the perfect blend of both his parents, smart and capable and kind. He took over more and more of the ranch operations, working side by side with his father. Rose married one of the ranch hands when she was 19, a good man named Samuel who loved horses almost as much as she did. They built a house on the far edge of the property and started raising horses, breeding and training some of the finest stock in the territory. The twins, Matthew and Mark, turned out to have wanderlust in their blood. When they were 18, they announced they were heading to California to seek their fortunes. Yates tried to talk them into staying, but Penelope understood. She had been the same age when she ran from Santa Fe looking for something more. "Let them go," she told Yates. They need to find their own way. They will come back when they are ready. And they did come back, 2 years later, sunburned and broke and full of stories. They settled on the ranch, taking over the cattle operation while Jacob focused on the business side of things. They married sisters from town, twin girls who were as inseparable as they were, and built houses next to each other. By the time Penelope was 45, she was a grandmother 3 times over. Jacob and his wife Sarah had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Rose and Samuel had a daughter who was already showing signs of being as horse crazy as her mother. And the twins both had babies on the way, their wives enormous and uncomfortable in the summer heat. Penelope loved being a grandmother, loved the way the little ones would run to her for comfort or treats, loved teaching them the same things she had taught her own children. But her favorite times were still the evenings on the porch with Yates, just the 2 of them, their grown children and grandchildren scattered across the property they had built together. "We did good," Yates said one night. He was grayer now, his hair silver at the temples and lines deep around his eyes and mouth. But he was still strong, still capable, still the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "We did better than good," Penelope said. She was grayer too, her hair more silver than black now, her body softer with age and childbearing. But Yates looked at her the same way he always had, like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Want to know a secret?" Yates asked. "Always," Penelope said. "I knew the moment you twisted that ankle that I was going to marry you," Yates said. "I did not know it consciously, but something in me just knew. You were going to be mine and I was going to be yours, and that was just how it was going to be." "That is not possible," Penelope said, but she was smiling. "You did not even know me." "Did not need to know you were meant for me," Yates said. "The rest was just details." "Important details," Penelope pointed out, "like whether I was a terrible person." "You could never be terrible," Yates said. "Even when you are being stubborn or bossy, or when you organize my desk and I cannot find anything for a week." "I organize because you leave everything in piles," Penelope said. "And I am not bossy, I am efficient." "You are perfect," Yates said. "And I love you more today than I did the day I married you. Which I did not think was possible, but you keep proving me wrong." Penelope leaned over and kissed him, slow and sweet, tasting of coffee and the peppermints he always kept in his pocket. When she pulled back, his eyes were soft with emotion. "I love you too," she said. "Thank you for seeing through my terrible lies and helping me anyway." "Thank you for being terrible at lying," Yates said. "Best broken ankle that never happened." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the ranch they had built, the family they had raised, the life they had created from nothing but hope and determination, and a woman desperate enough to fake an injury just to stay. Years continued to pass, marking themselves in the growth of grandchildren and the changing of seasons. The ranch thrived under Jacob's management, with input from Yates, who refused to fully retire despite Penelope's nagging about him taking it easier. Rose's horse breeding operation became famous throughout the territory, with buyers coming from as far as Texas and Colorado to purchase her animals. The twins expanded the cattle operation, making the Ingram Ranch one of the most successful in New Mexico. Penelope found new purpose in her later years. She started a school on the ranch property, teaching not just her grandchildren but the children of the ranch hands and neighboring families. She ordered books from back east, built up a real library, and spent her afternoons listening to children stumble through their lessons. Some of the older ranch hands who had never learned to read joined the classes, sitting awkwardly at desks built for children, and she taught them with the same patience she showed the youngest students. When New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, Penelope and Yates were in their 60s, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They stood on their porch and watched the celebration in town from a distance, content in what they had built. 34 years, Yates said, his arm around Penelope's shoulders. Feels like yesterday and forever at the same time. You ever regret it? Penelope asked. Taking in a lying stranger with a fake broken ankle. Yates pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. Not for one single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope Ingram. Then, now, always. They watched the fireworks bloom in the distant sky, colored lights reflected in their eyes. And Penelope thought about the terrified girl she had been, stepping off that coach with no plan beyond desperation. She thought about the choice she had made, to lie and scheme and stay in this dusty little town. She thought about all the moments that had followed, the 1,000 tiny choices that had led to this life. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would make the same choice again. Every single time. As they aged, Penelope and Yates gradually handed over more responsibility to their children, but they never truly retired. There was always something to do, someone who needed help, a grandchild who wanted a story or a ride on the old buckboard wagon that Yates refused to replace. Jacob became a pillar of the community, serving on the town council and helping to bring more improvements to Placitas. Rose's horses won prizes at shows throughout the state. The twins built their families, their children growing up with the same freedom and wildness that Penelope and Yates had fostered in their own kids. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1915, and Penelope grieved the loss of the woman who had helped her in those early desperate days. Lin followed his wife 2 years later, and the ranch felt emptier without their presence. But their children stayed in Placitas, becoming part of the fabric of the town, and that felt like a kind of immortality. Penelope's father had died years ago, and she had felt nothing when she heard the news. Her past life in Santa Fe felt like something that had happened to someone else, a story she had read rather than lived. This was her real life, here on this ranch with this man and these people. In 1920, when Penelope was 64 and Yates was 67, he had a heart attack while working cattle. Jacob and the twins got him back to the house, but they all knew. The doctor came from town, did what he could, but Yates was tired. His body had given everything it had to the land and the work and the family he loved. Penelope sat beside his bed for 3 days, holding his hand, talking to him about everything and nothing. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren paraded through, saying their goodbyes. Yates smiled at all of them, squeezed hands, offered words of love and advice. On the third night, when it was just the two of them, Yates turned his head to look at her. His amber eyes were still sharp, still full of love. "Best broken ankle that never happened," he whispered, and Penelope laughed through her tears. "Best cowboy who saw right through me," she replied. "I love you, Penelope Ingram," Yates said. "Every day of my life I loved you, and I will love you whatever comes after." "I love you too," Penelope said. "Thank you for letting me stay. Thank you for everything." Yates smiled, squeezed her hand once more, and then he was gone. Penelope sat with him until morning, her hand in his, and grieved the loss of the man who had given her everything she never knew she needed. The funeral was enormous. People came from all over the state, former ranch hands and business associates and families they had helped over the years. They buried Yates on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a view of the mountains and the valley he had loved so much. Penelope stayed on at the ranch, surrounded by her family. She was not alone, would never be alone, but she missed Yates with an ache that never quite faded. She would catch herself looking for him, turning to tell him something before remembering he was gone. but she also felt him everywhere. In the ranch he had built, in the children they had raised, in the land that still bore the mark of his careful stewardship. He was in every sunset, every morning ride, every laugh of a grandchild learning to rope. Penelope lived another 15 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1935 at the age of 79. They buried her next to Yates on that hill, and the entire town turned out to say goodbye to the woman who had stepped off a coach with a fake broken ankle and had stayed to build a legacy. At the funeral, Jacob told the story of how his parents met, about the lie and the knowing and the choice to help anyway. The grandchildren and great-grandchildren listened with rapt attention, and more than one of them cried at the romance of it all. "My father used to say that sometimes you have to trust your instincts about people," Jacob said, standing beside his parents' graves. "He knew immediately that my mother was lying, but he also knew she was someone special, someone worth protecting, and he was right. She was the best of us." The Ingram Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, each generation adding their own mark while honoring the foundation that Penelope and Yates had built. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from a moment of desperation, a lie badly told, and a man who chose kindness over judgment. And on that hill overlooking the ranch, two graves sat side by side, marking the resting place of Penelope Winters Ingram and Yates Ingram, who had found each other against all odds and had built a life that mattered. The inscription on Penelope's stone read, "She ran toward freedom and found love." On Yates's stone, "He saw through the lie and chose truth anyway." Together, even in death as they had been in life. A woman who pretended her ankle was broken so she could stay. A cowboy who knew and let her. And a love story that began with a fall that never really happened, but led to everything that did.